Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Hi, I'm Natasha Gordon. Jill Polinsky and I are co-presidents of Coordinating Council for the Parent Organizations of North Shore Schools. Welcome to Meet the Candidates Night for the North Shore School Board of Education election for 2022. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We thank the 6 candidates who have agreed to participate and are present tonight and look forward to an informative event. 2 candidates were unable to attend, Marianne Russo and Anna Carfunga, did I say that right? Who is ill. President of the League of Women Voters of Port Washington-Manhasset is Regina Gouvenier, and she's here to introduce the rest of her crew to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the forum at North Shore Board of Education candidates. My name is Regina Gouvenier and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Port Washington-Manhasset. As you know, our local league, as well as the New York State League and the National League, are nonpartisan. We never support or oppose any political party or candidate. Our mission is to engage you, the voters, by giving all the candidates for a given office the public space to answer your questions in a structured way while maintaining civil discourse. Before I begin, I want to thank all members of our league who have teamed up to make this evening possible. Most important to our league is Judy Temkin-Jacobson, who's the chair of Voter Services, who worked so hard to get this group organized and get this evening together. Judy's efforts and leadership make our Voter Services team what they are. Unfortunately, Judy could not be here this evening. Many of you have submitted questions through your website. We have several questions that have already been submitted, and we will be continuing that process this evening. We do have a mic there, and both Julie Meir and I will be calling on people from the audience who would like to ask a question. I believe our moderator, who is Michelle Lamberti, will be taking some questions that have already been submitted and interspersing them with questions from the audience. Our experienced people for this evening, of course, are Michelle Lamberti, who is going to be moderating, and Julie Meir and I will be calling on people throughout the evening. I'd like to describe one piece of our mission, and that is including our Voter Services work. What we want to do is to get candidates to be able to speak directly to people in forums like this. It also includes educating voters and advocating with legislators on issues involving voting and election, also on redistricting, natural resources, and health care. We only take positions on issues after studying them extensively. We hope you'll consider joining our league, which you can do on our website, lwv.pwm.org. Remember, the League of Women Voters is not for women only. I will now turn over the forum to Michelle Lamberti, who will serve as our moderator for this evening. Michelle is from Port Washington and is not eligible to vote in this election, as our rules require. She will now read our rules and procedures. We will then move on to opening statements and questions from the audience. I have asked the candidates to leave off their cameras. Well, tonight you don't have any cameras until you're asked to turn your mics on and to answer questions, but Michelle will take care of that piece of it. Yes, one thing. The young lady sitting in the front is Sarah Desiderio. She is from our league, and she will be the timer for this evening. She's going to be holding up a yellow sign, which indicates you have 30 minutes left, and also a red sign, which indicates stop. So Sarah will be controlling the length of the conversation this evening, and the moderator, if necessary, will stop you.
Awesome. Thanks, Regina. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you everyone for turning out. Thank you, Regina. You guys so proud of your school district. You have a great turnout tonight, and we want to jump right in because I know there are a lot of questions. We want to welcome you to the League of Women Voters Candidates Night for North Shore's candidates for the Board of Education. As Regina emphasized, I also want to reiterate that our league does not support or oppose any parties or candidates. I'm going to remind people, if you can, to please remember to silence your cell phones. And I will begin by reading the rules for the forum that all the candidates have agreed to. They're a little bit lengthy. So 1, the moderator will be a member of the League of Women Voters from outside the district. I live in Port Washington and unable to vote in this election. Candidates' opening statements will be given in the order in which we pulled lots. The candidates pulled lots before to determine the order for both opening and closing statements. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement. After all candidates have spoken, the moderator will open the meeting with questions from the audience and interspersed with questions that we've received online. Questioners will be asked to identify themselves, and the moderator will also ask questions from North Shore residents submitted in advance to an electronic address on the League of Women Voters of Port Washington-Manhasset website. And I think I'm going to intersperse. We'll do one live question and then one question that was submitted before the forum. We had quite a few questions that were submitted electronically. The moderator will instruct the audience to confine each question to the issues in the campaign and to take no more than 1 minute when asking a question. The shorter your question, the more questions we can get to. And remember, question, not statement, please. The moderator will be arbiter of whether questions are appropriate, repetitive, or abusive. I don't expect that to be an issue tonight. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer each question. At the moderator's discretion, the time for response may be reduced as long as it is the same for everyone. There will be no rebuttal. Questions may be addressed to a specific candidate or to candidates in general, although all candidates will be given an opportunity to answer any question addressed to a specific individual. The moderator will attempt to rotate the order of responses for each question. A league member will act as timekeeper. That's Sarah in the front. 1/2 minute from the end of any given time period, the timekeeper will warn the speaker by a prearranged signal. When the time is up, the speaker will be allowed to finish the sentence. Repeatedly speaking past the additional deadline may result in a candidate losing time for a future question or for others getting additional time. Candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Since the purpose of the meeting is to determine the candidate's views, no substitute speaker will be allowed to appear should a candidate be unable to attend. No written or recorded statement may be provided in lieu of active participation by a candidate. Forums require 2 or more candidates to be present for each seat that you're voting on. The use of props, charts, or visuals in the display of campaign literature is prohibited. In accordance with league policy, audio or video recording by authorized members of the media will be permitted only if agreed to by all of the candidates present. The league maintains the right to record the forum and to publish it to the league-controlled electronic pages. No other recordings will be allowed. No partial transcript or recording may be published without written permission from the league. And that is the end of our list of rules for this evening. So that's the end of the rules. Okay, so we are going to move now to opening statements. As I mentioned earlier, the candidates have pulled lots to determine the order of the opening statement. So our first opening statement is going to be from Lisa Cashman. Ms. Cashman?
I had the good fortune of pulling the first opening statement and the first closing statement. Lucky me. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Coordinating Council for creating this opportunity. Thank you all for finding the time to be here. The last 2 years have been hard, to say the least. It's truly thrilling to all finally be together. My husband Hal and I moved here in 2013. Our kids are in 6th and 8th grade now. No, 6th and 3rd grade. See, this is why I have the glasses. It feels like yesterday. We love living here and can't imagine a better place to raise our family. I could spend the rest of my 2 minutes gushing about it. I know many agree because many of you grew up here and moved back to give your own kids the same wonderful upbringing. For me, sitting here tonight has been many years in the making. I've made a job not only of serving our district and community, like I did with HEPA Viking Out, but spending years as a student of our district. I'm a working member of the Legislative Action Committee, and I've met with the district lawyers and lobbyists to understand not only LIPA, but nuances unique to our municipal budgeting. Perhaps most importantly, I've spent time and effort to understand the role of a trustee. I didn't do this because I plan to sit here, but because I love our schools, who my kids are becoming as a result, and have refused to be a blind advocate for them. I can confidently say that I put in the work to earn the privilege to seek your vote on May 17th. But why now? Why this year? More bluntly stated by my friend Rob at Grassroots, you're an idiot. I know what he means. I can't fix the division in our nation and in our community, but I can work towards solving problems I know about. I've proven it. Specifically, I can work to preserve what's unique about North Shore and how we provide robust opportunities for all learners. LIPA and post cuts are coming. I will advocate for minimal impacts on instruction. Tax increases are coming. I will advocate for the lowest possible. There's a lot of work ahead. I'm ready. I look forward to your questions tonight.
Thanks, Ms. Cashman. And actually, I know we all love to applause. I love hearing it. The candidates are really, doing a great job being up here. But to the extent we can keep the applause till the very end, because we'll just be able to get more questions in. So if you're able to indulge me on that, I will promise to try to get to as many questions as I possibly can. David Ludmar, Mr. Ludmar.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters. Thank you to the Coordinating Council, Jill and Natasha, and everyone for coming here tonight, and those who will watch the video afterwards. Hopefully you'll tell everyone to please tune in. In putting this campaign together, sorry, a little close, I couldn't help but notice that my first campaign 6 years ago, I have a lot more gray hair than I did back then, and I don't think I'm the only one. These have been really, really hard years on everyone. The pandemic, the national division, it has really been a challenge, and I think it's been the biggest challenge to public education in any of our lifetimes. Throughout that, North Shore schools got through it as well or better than any other school district in this country. Our schools were open all day for in-person K-8 instruction. We instituted remote learning, outdoor learning. We brought in new technologies. We did it using our financial resources prudently, and we never stopped focusing on students first. We never gave in to the temptation of test prep or rote learning. We focused on authentic learning. And that success does not happen by accident. It's not autopilot here. It takes the great work of our terrific teachers and staff who focused on kids, even while the rest of us, of course, like them, were worried about health and safety. They learn new techniques, new technologies, and it takes great support from the administration and staff, but also takes good, strong board leadership, which I've demonstrated. I've demonstrated it with transparency, patience, listening to all voices, understanding we're in this together, and making the tough choices. If those challenges were behind us, I would not be up here today. But we're facing the LIPA decommissioning and the important tax result that is going to be affecting all of our schools. And I want to continue being the steward of those changes while we welcome a new superintendent and 2 new assistant superintendents to central office. I have the experience to do that. Really quickly, for those of you who are new and don't know me, I'm a 17-year resident of Glenwood Landing, president of my local Glenwood Landing Glen Head Civic. My wife and I live here with our 2 kids who are in 8th grade at the middle school and 9th grade at the high school. I have coached softball and hundreds of kids for a long time, and I just want to again thank the League of Women Voters for putting this together. This is a very key, important part of our democracy to have this participation and to have you guys put this together in this way. It's just not the kind of thing you do in your backyard, so we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ludmar. The next will be Courtney Citko. Ms. Citko?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to come learn more about each of us tonight. I'm Courtney Sitko, and I'm here to ask for your vote on May 17th. But I would like you to hear why I know I would be a positive addition to the North Shore School Board. Thanks in large part to the live streaming technology, I have attended either live from home or live in person every single board meeting since my 2 younger children began their school careers. From a more hands-off but still highly aware role as a step-parent to a recent graduate and a current junior, I've been tuned into education in North Shore since my husband Bobby introduced me to his community 11 years ago. At that time, I was a frustrated teacher. In the trickle-down years after the 2008 market crash, schools everywhere were forced to tighten their belts, and elective courses like those I taught were often on the chopping block. accessing leave replacement part-time positions, I threw in the towel and I decided to use my natural skills and create my own opportunity. And I launched a small business incubator. I worked with dreamers who had a passion for their product, but they needed to work on their business structure, business plan, and often a reality check on feasibility. One of the greatest assets that I will provide to the board is my extensive experience listening to people's dreams, asking questions to fully understand their goals, and developing a multi-phase plan on how to convert those dreams into a reality. While the daunting financial outlook North Shore is currently facing, we need trustees who will take action, meet with the community to make sure that we hear all ideas, goals, and opinions and take them all into consideration. Then formulate a vision plan for the future of North Shore and a financial plan for how to support those dreams. Another reason I know I will be an asset to the board is that I can accomplish these things while working together with all members of the North Shore community, regardless of what town they live in, the size of their house, or what political party they're registered to. Truly, at the end of the day, I could care less about those things. I'll still treat you with respect and dignity, and I'll still represent the entire community, not just any one particular subgroup, because that is the most critical responsibility entrusted in a community member when they're elected to serve as a Board of Education trustee. I'm here because our children and the future Vikings to follow deserve an opportunity to receive the very best that North Shore has to offer, whether it's today, 100 years ago, or 100 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sitko. Next is Vanessa Grecky Marks.
Good evening, everyone. I also want to thank our coordinating council, Jill and Natasha, and the Voters League of Port Washington for setting this up tonight. It is really important, and also impressed with the level of participation this evening. One thing this community is sit back and watch. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Vanessa Grecky Marks. My husband Chris and I have been married for almost 14 years and have 2 daughters. One is a 5th grader at Seacliff School, and our little one will turn 4 this September. I grew up in Glenhead. I attended North Shore Middle School and High School. And our family moved back to this district in 2017, just like Lisa said, because my experience in our schools was positive. I wanted my children to grow up into the benefits of a small town living and our amazing schools. I'm a small business owner now with an extensive background in business management, development, sales, marketing, and training in the education sector. Throughout my career, I collaborated with parents, students, counselors, administrators, community organizations, and districts. I worked with some of the top-rated private schools and some of the lowest performing districts, and I know what the needs are of many different varieties of people. No successful collaboration can happen without listening, understanding, and working together to find the appropriate solution. And I promise as your trustee, I will be there for this community as a partner for the future success of our district. As a parent in this community, I hit the ground running. As soon as we moved back, I became part of any organization I could. For the past 2 years, I've served as the Vice President of the Seacliff Parent Community Association, overseeing all of our events. And I'm looking forward to working with the Teaching and Learning Committee as well. I'm sure you'd all like to know why I'm running, and I'm embarrassed to admit that in the past, I have trusted friends who I believed to be more involved and more educated than me to lead me in the right direction. The last 2 years have been a challenge for many of us as we navigate through unprecedented times, and I see the divide that this has caused in our community. I know that I can make a difference here, and running for and serving on any board is not for the faint of heart. The one thing that has always been true about North Shore is that we are a passionate and determined group of people. I think it's better when we work together, and I hope that we can find a way to do that again, and I look forward to being a part of the next chapter of North Shore School District. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Grecky Marks. Next is Sean Trager. Mr. Trager?
Good evening, I'm Sean Trager. I live in Glenhead with my wife Alexa, my son Parker, and my daughters Max and Sawyer. Parker's a sophomore here in the high school, Max in kindergarten at the Glenhead School, and Sawyer's slotted to enter the district when she comes of age in 2024. So that means that I've had kids in the school for the last 8 years, and I will for the next 10. First and foremost, I want to thank the North Shore Coordinating Council of parent organizations for putting this night together, and the League of Women's Voters for moderating. Secondly, and equally important, I want to commend the community for showing up tonight, for lending support, for listening, for learning, and for asking questions. I imagine that our greatest success tonight won't lie in tackling any great issue or answering a tough question, so much as standing here as a cohesive unit, charting a course for our collective futures. All of that said, it's my belief that this election is unique in its own right. North Shore Schools is on the verge of the greatest economic crisis we've ever seen, perhaps that the county's ever seen. While many take issue and took issue with the current budget, the harsh reality is that the LIPA debacle will alas leave us struggling to offset a tremendous shortfall for many years to come. I'm not an educator, I'm not an administrator, I'm not an attorney or a former board member. I'm a financial operations principal who intends to lever my core competency to help my community and ultimately my children. I endeavor to source and lever economic efficiency, which will ultimately empower the district and allow us to continue to provide our children with academia, sports, and cultural arts. It's for that job that I'm most qualified. I manage north of $1 billion in my professional capacity. I haven't seen a drawdown or loss in over 2 decades. I've spent more time probably looking at balance sheets over the last 2 days than most will in a lifetime. Now, I mentioned in my bio that I recently underwent open heart surgery for an aortic aneurysm. I mentioned that we sought the most qualified surgeon to perform the most complex procedure. My entire aorta was replaced. I didn't choose him based on his system of beliefs or whether he preferred the Mets or the Yankees. I checked his track record. I made sure that in my most desperate and vulnerable moments, I filled the room with the people, the team, most capable of helping me and saving me, and they did. Let me help establish a similar team for North Shore Schools. On May 17th, vote for Sean Trager. Line 6 on the ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Trager.
Perfect time.
And James Svendsen, Mr. Svendsen?
Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, Natasha and Jill, and all the people in the high school that were able to get this together for us. This is amazing and fantastic, the amount of people here tonight. This kind of involvement needs to continue for many, many years. This is great stuff. My name is James Svendsen. Some know me as Jimmy or Jim. We live in Glenwood Landing, and we have twins, 6th graders, Jake and Eleanor, and my wife's name is Tammy. They're home watching. I told them to keep looking on the streaming. So hopefully you can read my statement, and I'm going to try to summarize a little, but I don't want to take too much time. I've been in education for 33 years, starting as a New York City teacher, and then moving to Lawrence and Manhasset, and now I'm in New Hyde Park, Garden City Park as a director of curriculum and instruction. I've also been involved in soccer for over 40 years, at all levels as a coach and an administrator. My experience in schools, the budget process, state grants, inner workings of schools and districts, school law and personnel, I feel make me an excellent candidate for the Board of Ed. I'm not running for a position with any one particular agenda item. I know with full confidence that I can help. As an educator for so long and with all my other experiences, I know that I can do what I can do best, and that's work with people to solve problems. But more than that, my knowledge of budget and the budget process, grants, state and federal, and such will help us through the LIPA situation. Hopefully and finally, coming through COVID, we can thank our administrators, teachers, and staff for their flexibility, efforts, caring, and time, and get back to a normal school day. I know all of you join me in thanking the school staff for their efforts and for working with our students and my kids who had a great opportunity and I don't want to say time, but education during that COVID time. The job of education is a tough one, and as the board we can work with the teachers and the administrators so that teachers can teach and students can learn. So I hope stop. Okay. I thought I was doing good. Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Svendsen.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we open up to questions, I'm going to actually start, I think, with, we'll do the rotation. I'm going to start with one of the questions that was submitted online. So the next question we'll take from the audience. So start thinking about what questions you might have. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll rotate the order. Ms. Cashman is going to answer this question first, and I'll move down the line alphabetically. Sorry, Ms. Cashman. So a question from a community member. There are many competing agendas in our district for financing various programs such as sports facilities, the arts, the IB program, and other academic programs. Under the strain of the financial crisis that we face as a district, how do you plan to prioritize these competing agendas?
Thanks. I actually like going first for this one. So there are competing agendas. I had the good fortune of speaking with a large group of boosters focused on athletics last night. The number one priority has to be academics because that's why we're here. And what makes my goal for my kids is that they love coming to school, and that's my goal for all children. And all of the extras add to their love of school. So it's never an either or proposition. The cost structure of each is different. They're both equally as important, but we have serious needs. We have infrastructure needs, we have capital improvement needs, and my experience, which you're going to hear a lot about, doing the HEPA Viking Out fundraiser and partnering with the Viking Foundation is the wave of the future. As this money gets, and this is what's going on all around Long Island and some of these amazing facilities throughout Long Island, there's public and private cooperation. And we actually pioneered it here at North Shore 10 years ago when we built our track and our turf field. That was a partnership with the Viking Foundation, 3 equal members. There was state aid and funding, there were grants, there was money from our budget, and the community pitched in. And those are the types of ways that we can bridge the gap in the funding that we're going to experience. And I have experience doing it, and that's the wave of the future. And all are important, just to sum up. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Cashman. Next will be Ms. Sitko.
Thank you. So to create well-rounded students and a well-rounded educational experience, we have to offer a well-rounded program. So if there is an area that's suffering at the moment, we need to divert the focus to fund that area so that the entire population can benefit from it. Doing that takes a vision plan, and it takes a finance plan to make sure that we know how to get there. We have to identify which programs are doing amazing right now, how to keep them where they are, and then how to fund the ones that need to reach that same level. If people feel that there's an area that they would like to see do better, we need the voices of the community to come out and share that vision. You need to speak up for what's important to you. I think that's pretty obvious that that's how we've gotten our district where it is now. We need to continue that same motivation and that same passion for the areas so that we can all experience what is the best of North Shore.
Thank you, Ms. Sitko. Mr. Ludmar?
So I didn't get a chance to mention this in my opening, but this is what I do professionally. I own a small manufacturing business that operates here in the U.S. We actually manufacture niche apparel for all kinds of dress uniforms for military, police, fire, hotel, etc. And we don't have we don't get resources by taxing our customers. We have to live with what we have. And so resource allocation in the business world is the only thing that will keep you going. You can't go for more. If you go into debt, you will not survive, especially in this volatile world. Business and education are not the same, but the resource allocation that I've learned in my private career has been something I've been able to apply here. I understand the levers that schools have available to us, whether that is direct budget, whether that is reserves, whether that are capital reserves, which I'm sure we'll be talking more about again tonight, whether that is debt service, and of course the tax base that is available to this community, which will be shrinking with LIPA, another thing we'll talk more about tonight. I understand the idea of different competing agendas based on what folks want, but I think we all have the same agenda, and that's making sure that our students get what they need. Every one of our 2,500 students gets what they need. I don't think students are athletes or actors or robotics kids. All of these kids do all these things, and that's one of the things that North Shore has done so well, and we need to make sure we keep offering those so every kid can find their path in our schools, which is one of the great benefits of our district, and not something that every district does. We really focus on each and every child and giving them what they need, and so the resource allocation is the way to do that, but it's not an either or within the limited scope of what we have available. Thank you.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
So I think that the district is run as a business, right? There we have a P&L basically of where we are, and I don't think it's fair to assume that the community is ready and willing to give more of their hard-earned money in fundraising efforts to pay for things that a very large budget should be paying for. And so I think that we need to find more ways to incorporate all of these things, to focus on all of things. And Dave is right. You know, we have kids that are involved in many different aspects of this. Not everybody is focused on academics. Not every student is an academic. And they need to be provided with the resources for them to find success in the best way possible for them. That may mean they get into Cornell on a lacrosse scholarship, and that's how they're going there. So if we're not focusing on the things that are going to help all of our students succeed, each individual student needs to feel supported and feel like they're a pride in what they're doing. And that's not always academics, and that's not always the fine arts. But we also have a unique situation in front of us where this also can't be something that becomes the burden of all of the taxpayers in the district. We have a large budget. We have the money available. We need to find ways that we can use that to support all of the programs and all of our students for the continued success of this district. Thank you.
Mr. Svendsen.
Forgot. I'm on mute. I think that when we start with the words competing agendas, that's part of the issue. Everything doesn't need to be competing. I think we need to think of it as well-rounded programs for students who might be well-rounded. I have, as I told you, twin sixth graders. One loves art and one loves sports. So, you know, I imagine we'll be in all of it. I think in everything in schools, especially in schools, because our budget is limited, it doesn't matter how high it is, it's still limited. We have to work on a 3 to 5 year plan in all areas on a regular basis. So when you do that, that plan drives your budget each year, so that you know. So that sometimes you have to wait a year or two before you could start a new program or bring something in or increase a program, because the budget, it just doesn't work on the budget. So you look 3 to 5 years, and then at the end of that so intimidating. At the end of that 3 years, at the end of each year, you start to look and adjust that plan as you move forward, and that drives the budget. So it's not a competing agenda. All the agendas are for all different students, and we want all students to have some kind of support and have something they love to do in school, something that wants to make them, that they want to come to school for. And in order to do that, we have to figure out a way in a responsible manner.
Mr. Trager.
So as a parent, I would think that first and foremost, we want to preserve the quality of education that our students receive. Beyond that, the fact is that there is an economic shortfall, and we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions in the months and weeks and years to come. The reality is that there isn't enough money to fund everything that we might want to do. So the best we can do is kind of shuffle the deck and balance it as best we can, with a keen focus and a listening ear to the parents, the community, the taxpayers, to make sure that the programs that we value most are not somehow lost in the wind. And again, we alluded to the fact that we met with the Booster Club last night. We realized that sports are essential to the community, but it seems like a lot of the gripes that many of these folks have are things that can be easily remedied either through internal fundraising or, again, simply finding core efficiency. Similar to Dave in a professional capacity, I balance books for a living, and I think that oftentimes, in a personal sense, when I find alpha, it equates to summer camp, a watch, something nice that I might want for myself. In this capacity, those things might become jerseys for the middle school, right? When we think about the negligible amount of money that in many times might help better the student experience, it seems crazy that we're arguing over so many of these little issues where we could very much find that value if we just sourced it in a more efficient manner.
Thank you. Now we'll take a question from the audience. Regina or Julie, do you want to call on this one? And just let us know your name and where you live.
Is that it? Hello. Hi, my name is Robert Matner. I'm a 32-year resident of Seacliff. I have a budget financial question. Would you like me to hold it until the rest of the questions?
No, go for it.
Okay. As many of you know, where our standing is in terms of School of Excellence. I don't know the exact titles, but I'm concerned about the amount of money that is needed to educate. And last year we only got the vote by 17 votes. And there is definitely room, without being butchered, being unkind to people, to impact and find money. And if you certainly are aware of the Herrick's school district, you're aware of how they handle their administration and their teaching, and they're the top school in Nassau County. So my question to you is, what ideas do you might have using the budget that we have, and my suggestion to who to go to for advice on managing our top-heavy administration?
And we'll start, thank you for your question. And we'll start with that one with Ms. Sitko.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Matner, for your question. I do think that's an excellent question. We do have a top-heavy budget. We do have a very high cost per student in North Shore. I think that especially with the LIPA situation coming up, we need to do some very reflective analysis. We need to do evaluations as to where the efficiencies can come from, and the best utilization of our resources. And in this case, our resources would definitely include all of our staff, all of our administration. Everybody needs to make sure that they're doing the best job in their position. I think that it's our responsibility as board members to look out for the community and make sure that the community's resources or tax dollars are being spent in the most responsible way. So if that's better maintenance of our facilities, once we make investments into things like a turf field, that they're going to last their full time, that's something that we need to hold people accountable for and make sure that everybody is doing the best, to the best of their abilities.
Mr. Ludmar.
Thanks, Mr. Matner. I know you attended the budget meeting the other day and raised a similar point, and that was well taken then, and I hope that the superintendent's answer was, I'll take adequate. I mean, it's his answer, but the answer that was given was, there is no question that the specific suggestions you had given are an important piece of the puzzle. As my other candidates next to me have said, we are going to have to face those hard choices. But I think it's also, for me at least, worth saying that the numbers, I know administrators can be an easy target, and certainly administrative efficiencies are something that will be looked at, of course, as we go forward. But in terms of the numbers, which is really what it does come down to, I know no one's going to want to hear this, but the numbers are true that we do have a lower percentage of dollars we spend on administration than most of the other schools in our quadrant. Typically, it's over 12%. We're at about 11.8 or 11.9. Does not mean there can't be efficiencies that are there. Doesn't mean it's not necessarily high. And again, you had pointed out some of those things. This district has been committed to continuous review of its programs and seeing what they've been doing. To what Courtney said, we are a high-cost district. I think that there is a lot of diversity in the community in terms of how we calculate that. Certainly anyone paying attention knows that there are lots of ways to make numbers. I'm sure Sean has looked at lots of balance sheets that show the same information being presented in very vastly different ways. But that high cost per student is something that has been able to be here to the direct benefit of students. And no one, not trustees, not people from the community who complain, has been able to find some magic bucket of waste that's here. But when we do have to make those cuts, as that reduction in tax revenue from LIPA hits, those are going to be the choices that are being made. And if I could just have one more sentence, I would say, we're not just starting this process today. You don't look at this and say to everyone, here are the positions we're going to be looking at. Here are things we're going to be doing. That's not good for morale. That's not good for our students. It's not good for our faculty. But there are all kinds of alternatives and plans that are in place, and the board has been working on this not just this year, but for a decade, since LIPA first let us know they were abandoning their promise to our community.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
So from what I understand of what has been going on and what I've been educating myself on, I think it's an unfair situation to necessarily compare one district to another in terms of cost per student. While we do have a higher cost per student, not everything is apples to apples, and there's definitely nuances to every district. There are differences, there are reasons why certain things cost more and certain things cost less, and that's worth looking at. However, I also understand that we may not have been preparing as well as we could have for the current situation that we're being faced with LIPA. And so ignoring, maybe not ignoring, but maybe not preparing as well as we could have for what was coming is going to cause a situation that will be concerning to a lot of members of this community. And I think it's something that our faculty and our staff and our administrators are definitely worried about what's coming because of the lack of preparation in the last few years on this. And so I think I look forward to, as a trustee, collaborating with the people with way more experience than I have on this board to come up with creative ways so that we are minimizing the sacrifices we have to make for our students, our faculty, and our staff, and not transferring that cost onto our taxpayers at the same time. And it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a situation, and hopefully we can all work together to make sure that in the end we have a good situation to look at.
Mr. Svendsen.
Thank you. I feel like, again, this is a situation where I come in with a great advantage. I've been doing school budgets and for over 20 years. I was the director of curriculum and instruction and technology, so I had two of the major budgets in my district. And we're a smaller district, and it's very tight. We had to always continually work ways to figure out how we were going to do the things that we wanted to do within the budget. And there was no leeway. There was no playing with it. And again, I believe strongly in planning for those types of things. That includes staffing and administration and you know, even classroom aides and monitors and so on. That all has to be planned out so that, you know, in 1 year we can do this, and another year, year 3 we'll do this, and that's when we can add things. I know about the budget. I know about state part of the budget, foundation aid, federal and state grants, BOCEs, and all those. I know about revenue. I know about the process. Where one thing I try always to say, and in my own district, because I had a bad situation with it with pre-K 20 years ago, we had to cut it, and then it never came back until UPK was here. So we avoid cutting programs because they're very difficult to bring back. You may have to trim things here and there, and you do have to look at it with a microscope and really be, you know, especially in a tough time, but we want to be careful that we're not doing anything else. But I just have, boards don't, one second, boards don't make the budget. Boards approve the budget. The administration comes to us, and then we go back to administration and say, oh, let's see if we could do this. Let's see if we could do that. And then we hope that administration gets creative and gives us some good ideas about it. But we depend on the administration to get to us with that. Sorry.
Mr. Trager.
So it's a tough question because high cost doesn't always equate to high value. But in this particular case, our home values have appreciated, and our students have had a tremendously positive experience. On a personal level, we moved here from New York City. My son has an IEP, and he wasn't necessarily getting the services that he needed in New York City. And what we experienced here was a tremendously positive experience. I found my son, who was selective mute when we moved here. He struggled socially, emotionally, and otherwise, and he blossomed into someone, a young man, that I never even knew he could be, right? So for me, that's what my tax dollars equated to. That said, you know, working in a professional capacity, I know that I can always find value, right? We're always able to source efficiency if we just take a closer look. And from my perspective as a trustee, we would liaison between the community and the administrators, right? And I'm not an administrator, and I think that if anything, that should give me some bit of a competitive edge, because in many ways we might be breaking the mold. If we were able to step outside of the traditional thinking and figure out new ways of solving the same problems, we might be able to then, you know, find some value. Look, on a personal level, my parents are retired. My mother's a retired school teacher. My father ran a moving business. They retired with a fixed income. They couldn't afford the tax increases that our districts are faced. On a personal level, I get it, right? The fact is, I've made more money as the markets become more volatile, but not everybody is in that situation. So I get that we need to be very conservative and make sure that we protect our senior citizens, anyone living on a fixed income that can't necessarily afford the increases, but at the same point, we need to always preserve the quality of education, which equates to home values, quality of life, and everything else.
Ms. Cashman.
Mr. Matner, I can't tell you how often I think about last year's election, and I'll even do you better than 17 votes, because the truth is it failed. The people who showed up on election day failed the budget. It luckily passed by a few people who did absentee ballots. and I think about that all the time. I think we're in a unique position in that, in some ways where it's unique, the budget is created from scratch every single year. And next year, the unique position is we're going to have a new superintendent of business, and we're going to have fresh eyes on this project. There are some things about our current budget that are cyclical, like, for example, the fact that our teachers are highly, highly experienced at the top of the pay scale. Those things won't necessarily be the case forever, but I would caution us to be really careful about how the largest portion of our budget is, of course, our teachers. But if we look at surrounding districts, and I'll name Port Washington because it came up with the constituent recently, they made cuts to their staff, and it was detrimental over the last 10 years to the quality of the education they've been able to deliver there. So as we make this pivot, we all have to get involved. We all have to share our values and what's our priorities, because we're going to have to cut. And there's not a doubt about it, because a lot of the facts that were mentioned already. And so it's going to take community participation, the people in this room showing up to meetings early and often in July and August and September when these budgets are being built, to advocate for the type of education that you want to preserve here. Because all we can do as a board, assuming I'm elected, is advocate for what we hear in that room.
Thank you. We're going to go on to the next question. For this one, I'm going to use one of the questions that were submitted electronically, and the first person to answer will be Mr. Ludmar. The question is, please explain your stance on what it means to be transparent with the school curriculum. When has the North Shore District not been transparent with the curriculum taught in the schools? Please provide specific examples.
Thank you. So this has been a big topic of discussion in this community. It's a national conversation about the appropriate role of parents in the curriculum. In terms of transparency in the curriculum, I have seen throughout my progression with my kids, who of course have gone through our schools from kindergarten now into the high school, the way that we have interacted with our teachers and seeing what they are learning. We see homework. We have Google Classroom. We know what our kids are up to. We can communicate with our teachers. I think the pandemic, of the many problems and the many detrimental effects of the pandemic, was the lack of communication between our families and our teachers, where they couldn't have that question and that curriculum, and that interface with their teachers. Specifically to the idea of transparency, parents should know what their students are learning in class, of course. Parents should be able to talk with their students and their kids and know what they are doing in the classroom. That said, the larger question of parent involvement and choice in the classroom is a much more fraught topic, because we all know that one parent's ideas of what students should be learning is not necessarily the same as another parent's ideas of what those students should be learning. And the reality is, we do have a fantastic faculty here that we should and do trust to give our kids the right degree of education, and I believe that is working here in our schools. That's a position. That's how I feel about things.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
I love this question because I am on the Teaching and Learning Committee, and this is something that came up. We've only been able to have one meeting, but this was something that did come up. I think that, me personally, what I feel as curriculum transparency is really exactly what Dave said, is being able to see and feel what my child is seeing in the classroom. And while we do have curriculum maps that are available on our website, our school website, and while we do see some of the material, there's a lot that we don't have textbooks. And I understand we are moving forward in technology and things are different, and it is not my Catholic school days of 75 textbooks. However, having no homework, not knowing when tests are happening, this was a topic on our Teaching and Learning Committee. They were talking about sending home portfolios, and it's a little frustrating as a parent, and this is what I've talked to many parents about, is to have 3 months with no writing materials that my child has done, getting a test back that I didn't know was happening, hearing about something she watched in school that I've never heard of before or want to know more about, which aren't always available on Google Classroom for us to see and to hear. And I want to be involved in my kids' education, not to oversee what a teacher's doing or to tell them how to teach the material, but so that I can be a support system for them. We used to be partners, and it doesn't feel like that's the situation anymore. And I don't want it to be that way, and I don't think teachers want it to be that way either. And so I think we can work together more to make sure that we're supporting each other more.
Mr. Svendsen.
I have to say, I believe we have a transparent curriculum, and I think we, and myself as a parent, we have many opportunities to see that curriculum. We attend back to school night. We get a full load of everything that's coming up through the year. I have to say my wife does it more than me, but going into the Google Classroom, we see everything that they're doing in the Google Classroom. I mean, I know that I'm more familiar with it, but the New York State standards and the New York State Ed Department website is complete and full and has so much information. And I hope, and I trust that we are, Dr. Z, that we're following all the New York State standards to the T. I have never, and my wife has never called a teacher, and they've never not gotten back to us. I mean, within the day, if not sooner. And any question we've had has been handled. The district website also has everything listed on it that I need to see for as far as curriculum is concerned. I want my kids to grow up and be adults, and they have to learn then and during that time to, if there's something new or there's something uncomfortable that they're not sure of, they should come and talk to us. That's how I believe they become people. I have to agree with Dave. As far as involvement and choice, I think that's a slippery road. And I trust the administration and the teachers to do the job that they're hired to do. And I expect that to be done. And that's it.
Mr. Trager.
So it's tough because I can only speak to my one singular experience. With my children, I feel like the teachers have never been anything but open and honest to us, and they've never done anything but avail themselves to us. I think about when we were exposed to COVID earlier this year, and my daughter's kindergarten teacher brought the class assignments home to the house, right? She chatted with us on the front steps. She took the time and took an interest in my daughter's life, right? And on a secondary level with my son in the high school, I'm flooded with information. Almost too many emails and updates on that website about his experience, right? It's at a point where if I might confront him about an assignment not being turned in time, when in actuality the system just hasn't updated yet, right? The information is so unbelievably available to me. That said, that's my kindergartner and my sophomore, right? If your experience is contrary to that, I implore you to reach out to the appropriate people, and I'm sure that it would be addressed. Right? I can only speak to what I've experienced as a parent, and again, my experience has been positive with a lot of transparency.
Ms. Cushman. Cashman, I'm sorry.
I'm like, I tried to make a joke and it fell. So I think that words matter. And when we talk about transparency, the implication is that we don't trust our teachers, is that we need to be in the classroom with them, is that we want to babysit. And that's not really what Vanessa was describing. There's a communication gap, and it grew larger during the pandemic when we were divorced from each other and we were struggling, and it's only gotten worse. And so there's kind of a difference between better communication, which is legitimate, and if we're struggling in that way, and I could tell from the applause that she got that we are, then that's something we need to address and we need to work on. But when we talk about transparency, it feels very different to me, and it doesn't feel appropriate in terms of public education when there is a ton of information available. And I have a similar experience in that the Google Classrooms are loaded, and that I play the parent app like it's a video game, watching every single update to every assignment that she gets. So, it's a delicate balance, but there's needs here, and I hear that in this room, and I think we need to address them.
Ms. Sitko.
Especially for the young parents who are new to the district, K1 and 2, we've not had a single normal year yet. The connection from school to home is critical, and the pandemic has really accelerated those feelings of being left out of the conversation because we've literally been out of the buildings. That isn't a normal experience, and I think that especially at that level, it's created this feeling that we're being left out of the big picture. But when those feelings are being expressed and people are coming to the school in a vulnerable way, they need to be embraced and discussed and validated and not met with a hostile environment of accusing. There just needs to be a little bit more respect on both sides of the communication. There is a teacher in our district who I will tell you is amazing, that they start off the class, which is a politically driven, that is the topic of the class, and he will stand up to the class and he will tell his students, we're going to discuss politics here, and I promise you that you will not know where I stand on anything at the end of this class. We're going to discuss it all on all sides. That is the epitome of what every teacher needs to have, that philosophy. Every administrator needs to have that philosophy, because that's what's important, that the kids can learn the value of the lessons and that we can be transparent. That's transparency, as long as they're learning.
Now we're going to go to a question from the audience. And just let us know your name and where you live.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wrote it on my
Yeah,
phone
perfect.
instead of printing it out. My name is Giovanni Aguirre. I live in Glen Head. We're a family of 5, 2 middle schoolers and 1 GWL student. We've lived here for the last 12 years, and I'm proud to say that we're a multi-sport, multilingual, and multi-instrument family. This past winter, I found it incredible how the community came together for the football team. Certainly kudos to the football team. But I found myself really frustrated that they received all the community attention, while the district's most successful sports program, year in and year out, for decades, by the way, the girls' cross-country team receives and continues to receive minimal attention. In a past board meeting, I sat in the audience in awe of how some community members felt angry, embarrassed, and frustrated that the sports field were in terrible shape. I too am frustrated, angry, and embarrassed, but for different reasons. For the life of me, I could not understand why the budget did not pass, or at least the Prop 2, right, did not pass last year. I could not understand why the most successful program in the district, hands down, could not get the funding to create a course for the cross-country team, which my daughter is a part of in middle school. As a candidate running for the board, I assume that you know that the budget in the athletics Prop 2 in the last election included some of the very same needed upgrades for the sports teams. It was voted down with the help and effort of some of the very same community members who are here tonight. Yeah, it's coming. Thank you. That are here tonight showing their frustration with the current board. I would like to know your position on the budget and the athletics prop in the last election.
Ms. Grecky Marks will start us off.
I believe that there was some confusion last election over exactly what, why, and how, or the last budget vote, these things were going to be handled, why the community would be paying more. There was a very strong focus on lights, and many community members did not want that. I would never deny our students the facilities or things they needed. But I think that the board last year did not communicate effectively with the community on what exactly people were voting for and against in that proposition. And so I think when you tie important programs like athletics outside of our very inflated budget, you create a situation where people are reluctant to provide more funds than what they're already providing with their tax dollars. And so I think that's where the problems happened last year, and why some people and why some community members were confused, and why some community members were advocating for the voting down of that proposition.
Mr. Svendsen.
Thank you. So first of all, my position for the budget is always yes. I vote yes for the budget. And thank you. And for the Prop 2, it was yes as well. I will have to take exception to the not communicated. There was a point where I was like, okay, I get it. You know, I think you mentioned before there was so many emails about what was in this Prop 2 and so many, so much information that it was, and I think it was necessary. It was good. I think there were many other reasons why the prop went down, and that was information that was not coming from the district that really changed the way people voted. And I think that was a big part of that. I don't think it was a huge part of that. You know, my budget-wise, it will still be yes. I would like to see the reserve come back again in an off-cycle vote that we can then, again, inform and educate everybody, the community, on what's in this prop and what's in the reserve, and then understand it. And if it does take some more meetings, and it would be great to see this many people at it, and we'll continue to do that. I heard and I see, and I heard the anger and the frustration from the athletic group. I agree with you that, I hadn't heard about the girls cross country at all, really, and until somebody, I think, must have said something. So that's, I looked at the website, it wasn't listed, and most of it wasn't, so I have to stop. But vote yes, and vote yes again.
Mr. Trager.
So similarly, I was in support of the budget and also in support of Prop 2. And I think that the real issue here is that there's a certain subset of the populace that has taken it upon themselves to spread misinformation on social media, in schoolyards, and basically in the community itself. And that subset of the population backs candidates, they stand behind certain candidates, and it just so happens that during the last election, they took a shot at Prop 2, right? They took it upon themselves to kind of commandeer the election and to lead people in a certain direction. And ironically, a lot of the same people that might be lobbying for a similar necessity now might have voted against it in the last election. And it was probably because, despite the fact that we got many, many, many emails and there was a wealth of information available to us, it's tough to read all those emails. It's tough to comb through each line item, right? My wife always tells me that, like, a lot of people are looking for the skim. They want the bare facts about the situation at hand. And again, there's a certain percentage of our community that's giving what they perceive to be the raw facts. But the problem is that it's all flawed information and for the most part, misinformation. Whether it's comparing the cost per student, whether it's comparing the cost of athletics fields, it's oftentimes apples and oranges, right? But they use that information to steer us in a certain direction, and quite frankly, to the detriment of the community, the taxpayers, and more specifically, our children. So I think that really it's important to keep an open dialogue and to pay attention. And as trustee, what I would endeavor to do is kind of bridge that gap and help kind of trim down or make it a little bit easier to understand what we're actually voting on and why.
Ms. Cashman.
Hi. The women's cross country is the winningest program in the history of the school. And I'm not aware of any rings or anything that they've been bought, and it's an issue. I will say regarding the budget that I will say out loud that I don't think in this room there is a person who has been a more vocal and passionate defender of the budget, both on social media and in any platform that I could get. I was a vocal and passionate defender of the prop. The reason it failed, in part, as already mentioned, was an organized and coordinated misinformation campaign, but also the lights. Lights is controversial on its merits. It is not a slam dunk. But as a candidate, I can tell you, if elected, I'm committed to a proposition as early as it can legally be made to present a proposition for an athletics reserve. We need it. We need a safe place to put money. We need everyone in the community to know what these dollars are going for as soon as possible, because that's the purpose of the reserve, is that you vote to create it and then you vote to spend it, but you can't spend it on a dollar that isn't already named in the reserve. And everybody needs that, and we need that transparency, to borrow from a word from before. So, yes on the budget, yes on the prop.
Ms. Sitko.
To summarize, yes and yes, but I joined the community budget forum this year because I didn't just say yes on the budget. I said, I want to know more about the budget so that I can say yes on the budget. And there was a select few people who joined this budget committee, and through that experience, I can wholeheartedly say, yes, we must pass this budget. This is a solid plan. Yes, we must put an athletics-centric proposition out as soon as possible. I will say I don't think it was entirely the board that was responsible for the communication or the lack of communication. That's not necessarily the role. But it's the type of communication, and it's that we need more clarity. So instead of looking backwards and pointing fingers and saying this is this one, that one, whatever, it doesn't matter, because we need to look forward. We need to embrace that we have our top 3 administrators in the district are going to be brand new in their positions next year, and we have 3 new trustees coming on board. So if you haven't been happy yet, you have a chance to make change. There's change coming. You just have to put the right people in those positions.
Mr. Ludmar.
Hopefully at least one non-new trustee. Thank you. Thanks. Mr. Aguirre, that was a very long question. I'm going to try to get to as many points as I can, so I will talk quickly as I sometimes do. My daughter is a 3-sport athlete at the high school. She plays field hockey, she plays track, and she plays softball. And I support her, and I have been an active member of the Booster Club supporting her. And I do agree with you that women's sports need more attention and need more focus. Absolutely. But I also want to push back just a little bit. There is something different about football in this country. And the crowds that they had at that game and at those events, the parent support they had, the parents paid for those pictures, the parents manned that shack. If the parents wanted to man the shack for the track events and for the softball events, I would love it. I go to all these softball games. There's 6, 7, 8, 10 parents there. Football does drive a lot of that attention, and so there is a responsibility for parents to show up and support those things, which they do. 30 seconds, that can't be possible already. You kind of the clapping time? So I'm going to go real quick, even quicker. Yes, we have to support the budget. Yes, we should have supported that capital reserve. Yes, I drive to work every day and still see a sign that says, vote no, use the money you have. If this district and this board invested in the money we would need to hire a PR firm to counter those messages that some people seem to have all day long to do, those will be the very first people who will be criticizing what we'd be doing and saying we'd be wasting our resources by having an outsourced PR department. So while I understand that people can say we wish we had more information, the misinformation that many of my fellow candidates chose to speak about up here today is the driving force that made that confusion. That reserve is how schools fund big projects. It's how this district has funded big projects in the past. It's how we have the things that we have right now. And when we put one up again, hopefully this fall, I hope people don't look at that criticism that will be out there again under the guise of responsibility, when really it's under the guise of put a couple bucks back in our pocket that we can see through it. Thank you.
I'm going to remind the candidates, I know everyone's taken sometimes a little bit over, but please try to keep it to the minute and a half. The next question, we're going to start with Mr. Svendsen, and this is a question we received online. Newsday exposed the segregated nature of Long Island public school districts, where the Nassau County Dissimilarity Index, a standard measuring racial and ethnic division, was 78 out of 100, making it one of the most segregated suburbs in America. What responsibility do you feel North Shore School District has to hire and or develop culturally competent educators who could provide our students with different perspectives as they enter an increasingly diverse world and workforce?
Thank you. You know, it's a question I think every district should be working on, and it's my own district where I work, and I'm in charge of hiring professional personnel, teachers and administrators. We make an effort to do that at all times. One of the ways we did it was, in order to interview more people, we started now with interviewing round 1. We can get a lot more people in, and by doing, they have to submit a Flipgrid. It's a way to get to stop limiting the number that we can get, because we could send a Flipgrid out to 100 people. and we start to get a better feel of what's going on. We've also connected with Teachers College and in Columbia University, and asking them to send us candidates just send us candidates all the time. So we make an effort to do that in all areas. You do want the best candidate for all positions, and that's always that fine line that everybody walks on. But you certainly want to make an effort to move in the direction of having our children be taught by the world that they will be in, and that's something we should always look to do.
Mr. Trager.
So I think first and foremost, we want to make sure that our schools are a sanctuary where no child ever feel alienated, isolated, or marginalized for anything, whether it's race, creed, sexual identity, or anything else. So that said, if we want to create an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome, it's incumbent upon educators to make sure that they prioritize that we make sure that students are exposed to an array of cultures and a more eclectic understanding of the world in which we live. Right? We had the luxury of living in New York City prior to moving to Glen Head, and it's so very different. Right? In my son's kindergarten class, there was a clique of girls that only spoke French. Right? So when we moved here, it was shocking that all of a sudden there were one or two cultures at the very most. And I think for him it was strange because he felt like the folks that he had grown up with were somehow very different from what he was expected to become, right? So we tried to teach that he's a human being, right? That he's not a part of any particular race or creed, but that he's just a young man that's going to enter a world ridden with challenge, conflict. Some conflicts are greater than others for other types of people, right? The American experience isn't the same for every single person, right? And I think that, that gets a singular applause because it's hard to accept that, right? And I get that. And I get that because I've had the luxury of growing up as a white man in America, right? And, not to go too far off topic, but I would think that when we walk into these halls, that we're able to become the greatest versions of ourselves, independent of any particular, preconceived notion.
Ms. Cashman.
So when we talk about the goal for the students who go to school here, it's not necessarily to be great students, right? It's to be great citizens of the world. And to when I think about even my own children, I'm not raising children, I'm raising adults. And so in terms of cultural competent educators, we just want to create culturally competent humans. To the extent that we're able. Now, we don't live in a diverse community, right? So it is a challenge, and there is not consensus in our community about how to address this. But it's important to have the conversations and to start somewhere and to meet somewhere about it and to make sure that our schools are reflective of the community that we want to not only have but create. Thank you.
Ms. Sitko.
I think that we need to be inclusive and respectful of everyone because everybody has something that makes them special and unique. We need to really prioritize the basics, and not the basics of the academics, but the basics of kindness, civility, how to be able to communicate together. We need to lead by example, whether it's us as parents or the educators that we put in these positions. That's going to result in the ability to take on these heavier topics with a strong foundation and a strong base. So if we can bring the focus back to just be kind people, that's all I tell my kids. Just find a way to do something kind every day. And I think I've demonstrated that quite well throughout the actions that I've taken in our community, whether it was through my candy drives or my soldiers card drives or through raising money for North Shore Cares to support the restaurants and feed the frontline heroes. I do those things because it shows my kids that that's what really matters at the end of the day. So if it can make your eyes more open to accepting somebody else for who they are and what makes them special, then that's what we need to instill in our kids, the ability to do that starting from a young age.
Mr. Ludmar.
So the original question was about segregation in different communities and different schools, and I know Newsday recently won a Pulitzer uncovering the realities of this. So let's not deny the realities of this. Let's not deny the realities of the way that realtors for decades have steered different people to different communities. It's just a fact. It's just the reality of what goes on in our world. I think for our students, no student should ever come to our schools, ever, and be told who they should be or what they should think. But at the same time, no student should ever come into our schools and be prevented from being who they are and what their identity is and the way they want to think. They should come to our schools, learn about biology, sorry, biology is a bad example, but learn about science in general, learn about math, learn about Latin, learn it is about whatever it is that they're doing. And I think it's also been set up here that a couple times, that we don't live in a very diverse community. We do live in a very diverse community. We have many different backgrounds, many different families, much different economic diversity in this community that I think is pushed aside and not thought of enough as well. And I don't think we can pretend that there aren't issues that go on in our schools. That's natural, that's normal. All you need to go to school here is a tax bill that says you live here. And while I haven't met Courtney, I haven't known Courtney long, clearly you teach kindness in your house. You're clearly, that's something you do. But the reality is not everyone in our district necessarily sends their kids to school with that same perspective. And we have had circumstances when kids have been in situations where they have had their learning impeded. And I don't personally know the solution, but I'm not going to shy away from having frank conversations about getting to that solution.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
So, I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. The question was about the segregation on Long Island and Nassau County specifically, and how we were going to work to hire more culturally diverse teachers and staff, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that obviously I agree with everything that everyone said. Our children should be growing up in a safe space, and we are not a diverse community in those terms, right? We come from different backgrounds. We have different, socioeconomic backgrounds. Everybody's different in their own right. Everybody deserves a safe space to live and learn and grow. But I think we can only do so much to try and hire people that don't want to work here for various reasons. If we're not getting applications, and what we need to do is make this a place where people want to work. And unfortunately, from teachers I know outside of North Shore, we have a reputation where they don't all want to come here for a variety of reasons. And so we need to work to make sure this is a place where our faculty and our staff are out there saying that this is a wonderful place to be and a wonderful place to work, and we will be able to draw more of those people here. More people who will want to come and teach our students and not feel like they're going to be, judged at every turn for everything they do. And so where we find that, where we reach out for that, where we get those applications here, where we get those resumes, and where we find those people is really going to depend on making sure this is a place where people want to come to be. And so we can provide our children with the experiences and the diversity in their classrooms that they deserve.
A question from the audience now. Okay, I'll go back to the questions that were submitted, but I'll keep checking back in with folks. Oh, do we have one person? Come on up. Sorry, it's hard to see. Come up to the microphone so we can hear you better.
Everyone remembers The Price is Right, where they used to call someone and they would.
$1.
Is Katie Weinberger here?
So I just want to thank everybody for having this event. And in regards to the last comment, there's been, I'd just like to see if we could get some specifics, because I think it's a little bit of a claim that this is not a great place to be in, that we don't attract the right teachers. So, and I completely respect the view. I just think it's a significant enough comment that I'd like to drill down to specifics.
So do we want to start with Mr. Trager?
Sure, I didn't make the comment, so it's hard to really give a definition.
Okay. Yeah. So since it was directed, I think more as Ms. Grecky Marks, I'll start with her, and then every candidate's entitled to chime in if they feel like they need to, and if not, that's okay too. So Ms. Grecky Marks.
Sure. So recently, we've been searching for a principal for the middle school, and there are several people that were on the committee to interview the people that we had. And our candidates, from what I heard, were less than appealing to the majority of the people on that committee. What I've heard from other members outside who wanted to apply for that position, administrators with experience in other districts, were told not to bother, they won't get the position. And others that felt that some people in this district were dismissed unfairly, and so just didn't even bother putting their careers on the line to apply for positions within our district. So that is the specifics I'm referencing. Does that apply to everybody? No. Is it concerning? Yes. And so if that's what's happening and there's a reputation out there that we're hearing about, it should be noted and it should be addressed.
Mr. Trager, if you have anything, I'm just going to ask everyone just in case. Ms. Sitko?
I'm just going to chime in with one personal feedback. So I mentioned earlier I was a teacher formerly. So I was a teacher of family consumer science and business and marketing. And I actually applied to North Shore schools. And I did so because I knew I was moving here, honestly, let's be real. But in the family consumer science teaching world, there was a reputation at the time that North Shore historically will bring in a teacher in that position, hold them for 3 years, and then let them go and transition through. And there was a cycle of that happening. So while I know that many of the teachers that my children and my stepkids have had are fantastic, I think that there is also some amount of reality to that statement, that there are reputations outside of North Shore. Correct or incorrect, I can't necessarily speak to that, but it is a thing.
And I haven't forgotten everyone. I am going to get to everyone. I'm going to do Ms. Cashman. Keep coming down.
I thought you forgot about me. So I think it's really dangerous to start gossiping from this panel and to start talking about hearsay. And I can tell you that there's objective measures for this stuff, and I've looked into it, and according to niche.com, which isn't perfect, we're about I can't remember if it's number 2 or number 4 best place to work in the entire state. So that speaks to me. Is it a perfect district? Not a perfect district. Do we have problems? We have problems. Do we have a high leadership turnover issue? We do have a high leadership turnover issue. But to make blanket statements about our teachers is not accurate.
Mr. Ludmar?
Thank you. Hold on. Start now. I think I agree with Ms. Cashman. I think it is very dangerous to think that you can be a trustee and focus your decision-making based on anecdotal hearsay. There's no rebuttal, it's not a debate. We had 90 applicants, I'm not saying that because I'm on the board and I know, I'm saying that because that was reported by Dr. Dolan. 90 applicants for that middle school leader. We recruited and successfully landed the principal of Stuyvesant High School, who has been a fantastic educator for this building. I ran the search for the new superintendent, and even though we are thrilled to have Dr. Zublionis coming on here, we didn't do that because he was the only one or because we moved him up the ladder. We did it after a thorough search that had tremendous accomplished leaders come here. And Dr. Zublionis rose to the top of a tremendously talented field. Bridget Finder, who runs Glenwood Landing Elementary School, is one of the finest recruiters of teachers that I know, and I've been told that by Dr. Melnick, Dr. Girizzo, and Dr. Dolan. It's clear that we are getting great people to come to this district. I do believe that passing a budget by 17 votes doesn't help people want to come to this district, and that can certainly be a detriment.
Mr. Svendsen?
When that statement was said, teachers don't want to come here, I wrote it down just because it hit me, it struck me. I've been in education for 30 years, and I've never heard that statement. And I've been on many interview committees for, including the middle school principal committee. When you go to committee, anything can happen. Great candidates that go to, you know, smaller committees and they get to bigger committees and they just don't pan out as well. You know, that's the job of the process. That's why the process is difficult. You want to make the process difficult so you get the best people. You know, it's just weird to me because I sat on that middle school principals committee and I didn't even tell my wife what we saw or heard. So, you know, it's concerning to me. So I would say I've never heard that anyone doesn't want to come to North Shore. You know, I probably could say in my district, anyone want to go to North Shore? And I would get some takers. I think that, you know, we probably use similar systems like OLAS and all those things. When I have a teacher position, I have a teacher position out now. I think we're up to like 600 resumes. The difficulty is sorting through resumes and getting people, and that system doesn't always work as smoothly. Sometimes you have to start again. So, you know, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, and I know we were jumping around a little bit on the last one, the order, so I'm going to go back to the order we were originally supposed to be for the last one, to be fair to everyone. So the next one is an online question, and it is, by the age of 6, girls become less likely than boys to associate brilliance with their own gender and are more likely to avoid activities said to require brilliance, shows a new study conducted by researchers at NYU, the University of Illinois, and Princeton. The gender equity gap directly affects young students who identify as female entering advanced STEM courses in our schools. For example, in 2015, only 25% of high school graduates in New York State entering computer science were female students. The question now: how do you plan to address the gender equity gap, which begins in our elementary schools, to flip the existing narrative and systemically address gender inequity? And Mr. Trager, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I'm not an educator, so my expectation would be that the teachers are addressing that gap. Right? And in my experience, they're doing just that. I have a 5-year-old daughter in the district, and I think that she's being taught and being told that she could be anything and everything that she could possibly want to be. Right? So while there certainly is a gender gap, and it may have historically occurred on that level, my experience with the teachers here is quite the opposite, that our young girls are being taught that they could become anything and that they will succeed and strive and thrive in the same world that their male counterparts might.
Ms. Cashman.
So there is a point where we do rely on our excellent educators to answer some of these questions. I will say that recently there were some, we call them in-services, but special programs that were brought into the schools, and the girls were separated into my beautiful self, and the boys were, my beautiful me, and the boys were separated into my best self. And, you know, we set our hair on fire and tried to address it right away. And now there's a really terrific program from Yale called Ruler, which covers some of these same self-esteem problems and development issues that's going to be rolled out. And you know, the vernacular has to change. The eye through which we look at some of these things have to change. And I see it personally. You know, I happen to have a daughter who loves science and math and bandsaws and makerspace, and so I have skin in the game, right, to help her along and to make sure that things stay equitable. But again, it's really, in terms of systemic things, those types of programs to amplify voices, but we rely on educators as well. Thank you.
Ms. Sitko.
I would agree. We need to expose our children to a diversity of experiences from a young age and continually. We need to make sure that all students are being encouraged to be in these activities, whether it's through, I mean, it's amazing that our students in the elementary schools, we have STEM education on a cycle. That doesn't happen in all districts. We have foreign language starting in kindergarten. That doesn't happen in all districts. Even Manhasset, it's 7th grade. Like, we are doing a great job at North Shore of exposing our students to so many different things on a regular basis. Counseling is built into the cycles. So when we're starting out on the lower levels of exposing students to every opportunity and every student gets that, then we're just going to continue to make that exposure over the years and enhance the opportunities so that it doesn't matter who joins the clubs. My mother is retired from Massapequa Schools. She was the pioneer of the robotics program there. I watched the dedication and the passion that she had for getting an all-girls team in the robotics program. That's the type of amazing opportunity that you need to empower the teachers and the administrators to support those types of things. Doesn't have to be an all-girls team. It should be all students on multiple teams to get to where they need to be successful.
Mr. Ludmar.
Thank you. I very much agree with the idea of opportunity. I don't have too much more to add to this, so I'll try to use a little less time on this question, except I think it is worthwhile to mention that the district did conduct a very thorough equity study when I first came on the board, so that was maybe 5.5 years ago, and there was to look at the difference in our enrollments and what our students are doing, and the progress in that really was stalled during the pandemic. I think that's an area that we need to be addressing, continued to be addressing. We've been dealing with crisis after crisis, but that's sort of an ongoing crisis, or at least a major point of contention to study. I think we do have some things that do help address it. Certainly the STEM and STEAM programs at the early ages. The fact that we have open enrollment for all of our advanced classes for every student. I think there's a myth out there that it's only the top students who are in those classes. Those students are open to everyone, and all students are encouraged. I know in the science research program, for example, in 9th grade, which is done as a zero period program, they realized that it was all the boys who were being pushed through the program, and so they opened it up for a second opportunity for kids to enter mid-year through, specifically targeting students who were performing well in 9th grade science to give them an opportunity. And that's a way to try to maybe students that aren't caught up in the original net for whatever reason get scooped up the next time. So those are some things that I think that are important in addressing this.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
So I'm not an educator either, and I think that as a trustee, as a board member, our board in general, they can provide the resources and the funds to make sure that those resources and those programs and the amazing opportunities that our children have in the classrooms are there. I think then it becomes, as Sean said, a partnership between parent and teacher to recognize the students who have the gift of science or math or whatever it is, girl, boy, whatever you identify as, to foster that love and that commitment to continuing to grow in that educational field. As a trustee, as I said, we can provide the resources for our students, we can provide the opportunities for our students in this district, but I think parents and teachers are the ones who need to recognize and make sure that our girls specifically, because that's what the question is about, are not losing interest over time or seeing themselves as not worthy or not capable of continuing on a career path or an educational path in those fields.
Mr. Svendsen.
Thank you. To me, these issues they're not simple, but they're, as a board, they're in a sense simple. You know, if we see this as an issue in the district, then we probably do, or we see it as an issue in the country, in the world, probably. Those are things we should address. But that's then for the board to set a goal and the administrators and the teachers to work on that goal to see and give us data and information that would help us to understand it better. And then maybe there are things that we need to do to help teachers and staff along by getting some professional development, by bringing in speakers, by bringing in people and that can help and show by example that there are many, many opportunities out there for boys and girls, men and women, that there are many opportunities out there that they can pursue. You know, when I was young, all teachers were women and all nurses were women and all that. Yeah. And that, you know, that's certainly a change in everything that we've done. The world is changing. We have to all change with it. And sometimes some things move a little slower, some things move a little faster. And it's our job then to help, you know, move it along so that it's at the pace that's comfortable for everybody.
And a question from the audience.
Joanna, Commander Glenhead. First, before I ask my question, I'd like to acknowledge your willingness at this particular time to serve in this position. This is a very challenging time for our community, and I thank all of you for stepping up to the plate. Research over the last 6 to 8 years indicates a devastating increase in the mental health issues of our children. There's been a significant increase in anxiety and depression and hopelessness. There's an ever-increasing number of children who express thoughts of self-harm. Has the district done enough to address this issue, and what additional social emotional programming would you support? Thank you, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Cashman.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the Person of the Year, Joanna Commander, and former board member. Thank you for your question. You know, mental health issues were already at a crisis state for children before the pandemic. You know, there's a lot of literature about it, and the pandemic has done nothing to help that situation. I think that in our district, it's possible that we're putting a heavy reliance on the guidance counselors, which we have built a tremendous guidance program, and we have, different from other districts in in the elementary schools, we have that, which when you leave North Shore, you don't necessarily even have that much support. But I think it would behoove us to move from a crisis management position to more of a proactive position, and to investigate ways that K through 12 we can start to become more aware of some of warning signs and some of and have a more nuanced conversation about improving these issues before they get to these crisis points. And certainly it's a complicated time to add programs, but it's worth it for the health of our kids. That is another thing that differentiates North Shore education from some of the other high performing districts, is we aren't trying to grind the tips of the pencils to the ground. So that is a mixed metaphor, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Ms. Sitko.
I think that we've done a great job adding in a number of programs focused in the counseling, focused in the social emotional learning. I know that there are many districts on Long Island that are begging right now for social emotional learning to take place. North Shore should be proud of their forward thinking and their willingness to invest into that type of support for our kids, because I know that the pandemic only made those things worse, and I've seen it in my own household where the situations, the parameters in which we were asking our kids to learn was not the greatest of situation for anybody. But the resources in the schools to help our kids get through those problems, through that anxiety, through that uneasiness. My children are young and they needed to learn how to learn, and now they had to learn how to learn through all of these other restrictions, and they had the support there that could help them to accept and help them to find ways to cope and to move through effectively, and they're thriving now. So I think that we've done a great job. I think we need to continue to do a great job. As Lisa mentioned, we need to pivot. We need to go to more long-range looking, planning on how to prevent those things from coming back to haunt us down the road.
Mr. Ludmar.
Joanna, thank you very much for that question, and for the time on the board where you always made that your priority. I think as long as there are students who are feeling those things, and there are, then no. It's not enough. I'm not sure that we're ever going to catch every student and have other, that's just not the reality. There will always be these issues. It doesn't mean that we aren't doing a good job, and I agree with Courtney. It doesn't mean that we don't have good things in place. But the specific answer to your question is we need to continue doing more. Some of the things that we have done, I think the move from a guidance model to a counseling model in that office has not just been a rebranding. I think that's sincere. I think it's really been focused on individual students. I think the recognition that every student needs to have a connection within their building, and you don't look at this as how are we going to catch all these students. You look at it as how is John Smith going to be connected, and how is the student doing, and the focus that we can provide to each of those kids to make sure they're not falling through the cracks, or on the other side, to make sure that through the pressure they feel through either the rat race of college or just the pressures we all feel in this world that filter down to our kids, even at very young ages, is something that isn't missed. Because this is this kid's only chance to be 5 through 18 years old. And if we're going to launch them into this world, we need to continue focusing, as we've been really focused on doing, on building that strength of character, building that self-confidence, and building that, that belief that who they are is good. And the CASA partnership that we have that you also help develop is a very big part of that as well.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
The one thing that I see is that North Shore has not skimped on our services provided for our students for their social emotional well-being. We have a very small school in Seacliff, and there are a lot of counselors, there are a lot of social workers. Sometimes my daughter complains about them on the playground, following them around. But if there's too many of them, that's a good thing. And I think that for the students who need, there's levels of safety nets, right? Like as parents, we don't always see the things that are bothering our students. Sometimes we have blinders onto that. There are teachers, there are counselors, there are other parents in the community who our children are interacting with. And I think we can always have more. We can always have more support. But I think we're doing a good job here. I think there's a unique set of circumstances in the last 6 to 8 years, as Joanna mentioned, where our children are not necessarily in the bubbles that they used to be in. They're exposed to more on social media. They're exposed to more in the content they're watching and listening to and reading, which I think provides a new level of stress and anxiety and depression for some kids. And so as parents and as teachers and as administrators and counselors, we need to recognize where those stresses and things are coming from so that we can address them and help our kids to be the best that they can be and not feel those pressures from the outside world as much as they are right now at such a young age.
Mr. Svendsen.
Thank you. The social emotional support for students is something that, when I was a student, it was just deal with it, like, you'll be okay, you'll be all fine. Stop crying, right? You're a boy. So I think that, in today's world, again, the world has changed, and it's changed in a positive way in the sense of that we are aware of these things, we want to help students, and we want to do that. And I think the counseling departments there's two ways to go. They try to be proactive, and there's often dealing with reactive things because things come up. And I think that I can say for my own 2 kids who have needed to speak to counselors this year, I couldn't have been happier. They've taken care of the kids and reached out to them and helped them and then contacted us. And so I couldn't have been happier. I would say though, like this last 2.5 years, has been incredibly hard on teachers and staff as well. One of the things I did in my district was to bring in mindfulness professional development, and we had a mindfulness person 2 different ones, who met with staff one morning, optional meeting, one morning a week, virtually, and many staff members took advantage of that just because they too are having a tough time with the transition to back to school and the transition to remote and who's doing what. It was difficult for everybody, and when teachers are stressed and having a difficult time with that comes off to students as well. So I think when we talk about social emotional learning, especially after this last 2 years, we really have to address both students, staff, teachers, and I'm one of them. Us poor administrators never get any help, so we need some help.
Thank you. Hold on. What? Excuse me. Mr. Trager.
So Joanna, thank you for that important question. And I think, my wife is on the board of CASA, and I think there's obviously a deep connection. There's a deep connection between substance abuse and mental health. And as Jim said or alluded to, the world that our children are growing up in is very, very different, and in many ways a lot more dangerous than the world that we grew up in. We're at a point now where a depressed kid could go to a party, have a beer, and take a pill and die. Right? And that wasn't necessarily the environment that I grew up under and the situation I grew up in. So you could never do enough. Right? We always need to make sure that we're available to our children, communicating with them as parents, as educators, and anything else. That said, my experience with the district has been a positive one. When my son left the middle school, I wrote heartfelt, teary-eyed letters to all of his teachers and counselors for guiding him through this very, very difficult time in his life. I felt bad for not keeping in touch with them when he entered the high school because I felt like we had cultivated this strong relationship and they were a part of my family. Now, similarly, 6 months ago today, a member of our community, a father of 2, passed away, pancreatic cancer. He left behind 2 children and wife. And at his funeral, I saw more teachers than I see at pickup and drop-off. Right? If that's not a testament to our teachers standing behind our children and our families during moments of crisis, then nothing is. Right? In that moment, I felt that I was a part of a tremendous community that I was in, deep debt to. And I think we could always do more, but I think we're doing a good amount. Thank you.
I can barely see the time, but I think we're getting close to that hour. So I will do one more question, and then we'll move to closing statements. No, I saw your hand was up before, so, and I'm sorry for anyone I wasn't able to get there. Your community has been really great in coming up with wonderful questions and for really participating in the process.
Raise that a little bit. Thank you. My name is David Hollander, resident of Glenhead, and again, thank you all for being here tonight. So my question is somewhat related to some of the earlier things that were being asked, and just wanted to expand on some of the answers. Nationally, we're seeing an increase in proposed or passed legislation severely limiting discussions around race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity. As a potential board member, what is your commitment to building a welcoming and supporting environment that celebrates and models respect for all students of all races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, and gender identities? And how will you navigate some of the recent calls to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion?
We're going to start with Ms. Sitko.
That's a heavy question. Thanks for wrapping that up at the end. So, I think that there's obviously a national divide on so many issues. This might take the cake on that one. At the end of the day, we need to focus on where we're all the same and how we can all care and love one another and teach our children foundational skills of empathy, kindness, understanding, compassion, so that they're equipped to deal with the larger issues like the diversity, equity, inclusion. If they're hearing things in their environments that are not supporting an inclusive world, it's going to make their ability to accept and include more challenging. So while they need to learn it in school, they also need to learn at home. And they need to be able to get the values from their family. And they need to have the freedom to know that every family may think differently, but at the same time, every family cares about their community and needs to instill that level of care and that compassion and that humanity portion of our lives. It's what's really going to either make or break our society as it goes forward.
Mr. Ludmar.
Mr. Hollander, thank you. I think one of the things that's very important as a as a trustee is to listen to our students when we have committees for hiring professionals, When we hired our superintendent, we interviewed our students, we hear about student experience. And while most of our students do come here and enjoy their days in our buildings, even with that, there certainly are student voices telling us that there are impediments to their learning when they're coming here. That's just a fact. In some cases, we've had that with the Weave movement several years ago. We have that currently today. Doesn't make North Shore a bad place. Doesn't mean we're different than anywhere else. But again, as I talked about earlier, when you don't hear what you want to hear, you don't sweep it under the rug. As has been mentioned before, I am not an educator, and I think that I understand very well the roles of the board as oversight of the administration. The role of a board is to hire an administration to make recommendations, but the role of the board is also to be the voice of the community and to make sure that the administration doesn't ignore when those problems are happening and doesn't pretend that they're not there, and that addresses it so every student gets a chance to experience these buildings free of impediments. And so it needs to be a challenge with the administration to identify these things and come up with something that is always in the student best interest and is also something that our community as a whole can live with.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
I think having grown up in this community, in this district, and been living here for the last 5 years again, North Shore has always been, in my experience, a welcoming, inclusive, wonderful community where families, cultures, races of all types have been welcome, have been accepted, and have been loved. I know that there is a lot going on in the world around us right now, and I think there's some confusion as to where some people stand on where this is going, and I think it's more about making sure that we're providing our children with the resources they need to continue to be accepting individuals at home, and then making sure that content is presented in age-appropriate ways for children to be able to process and learn from what they're being told in the classroom. Children develop at different rates. They have different capacity for understanding, and making sure that we're providing them with the necessary information at the time for them to continue to grow as human beings and be accepting from what we've taught them in our home through what they're learning in the classroom. I think that's the most important thing, is that we provide them consistently with good opportunities to display and learn how to be accepting and loving and kind.
Mr. Svendsen.
Sometimes my own words probably can't do the justice that others can, so I took a statement for this from the National Association of School Psychologists. So bear with me for a minute. Prejudice, discrimination, and racism. It's a statement from them about that. Positive educational and social outcomes for all children are possible only in a society, including schools, that guarantees equitable treatment to all people, regardless of race, class, culture, language, gender identity, religion, sexual orientation, nationality, citizenship, ability, and other dimensions of differences. NASP firmly believes that all students are entitled to an education that affirms and validates the diversity of their cultural and individual differences, fosters resilience, and facilitates well-being and positive academic and mental outcomes. I mean, I can't say it any better than that. And what I get from that is really not that we need to focus on that we're all the same and what our similarities is, but I want to focus on what our differences are. And we need students to help to do that. And central to that is allowing honest and respectful and developmentally appropriate discussions about these topics in schools and with teachers and with professionals that are trained to do these things. So that's my statement.
Mr. Trager.
So it's interesting because across the panel, we seem to unilaterally agree that we want to have an environment where students, parents, and teachers feel welcome and included. Yet for some reason, this issue keeps popping up, right? And perhaps it's because there's so much rhetoric fueling the debate, right? From my perspective, there seems to be a wealth of misinformation, again, largely being spread on social media and otherwise, with this perception that our children are being taught something that, in my opinion, or in my experience, they're not, right? I want my children to learn the truest version of history. I want them to understand what has actually occurred, even if that sheds some sort of sadness or negativity on certain periods of history, right? The reality is that bad things happen to good people, right? And people suffer, and we learn from that adversity and that experience. So it's kind of confusing because we want to create this unilateral environment where everybody feels welcome, yet for some reason, a lot of people seem to think that it's the Board of Education's job to rewrite curriculum. It's not. So while we can create this welcoming environment where nobody feels marginalized or excluded, the reality is that it's not going to be within my capacity, should I be elected trustee, to alter curriculum anyway, right? And beyond that, I think there's this perception that the students, there's the elusive boogeyman of what's being taught that's not actually being taught, right? There's this, this thesis that what's being taught on a graduate level is in actuality being taught on the elementary level. And in my experience, it's something quite the opposite.
Ms. Cashman.
So I agree with a lot of what's already been said, and I think too that, you know, it's a theme with me tonight, that some of these conversations need to be had. There's, you know, you hear CRT and the misinformation, and there's two sides of you know, my friend Chris Wolf uses this analogy, I'm gonna borrow it, which is we're all in the same building and there's two towers that are sort of yelling at each other, and let's meet in the lobby, and what do you mean by CRT, and what do you mean by CRT? And I would imagine we all don't mean the same thing. So critical race theory with respect to race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual identity. I agree that all conversations that happen in the school must be age appropriate. I will also add that in kindergarten, kids need to feel unencumbered to talk about their families, however their families look. And that might be difficult for some families to prepare their kids for. But these are conversations that we have to have, because in a public school, all children deserve to not have to worry about those things to the extent that we can do it for them. Thank you.
So now we'll conclude the period of questions, and we're going to move to closing statements. They'll be 2 minutes each. And Ms. Cashman, you begin.
I have the good fortune of speaking first again. In closing, I'm a parent, a taxpayer, a homeowner. Schools are expensive. The result of the last election weigh heavily on me, which I've already shared. I know that to keep education funded, which is vitally important, we must be increasingly sensitive to all the changing fiscal demands. We must work towards building back trust that has been eroded. I believe that Dr. Dolan has showed us this year that we can do this by listening closely and working even harder at communicating honestly and effectively. In the time that I've lived here, I've seen our schools flourish to heights I did not imagine possible and earn more and more accolades. They achieved this without resorting to some of the gatekeeping tactics of other high-ranking districts nearby and by remaining focused on all students. As I said before, all I want for my own kids and the students of this district is to love coming to school. There's a lot more to that equation than academics. As I said, I learned loud and clear that there are athletic needs and infrastructure needs. I know we have changes to be able to continue to afford the caliber of education we've been providing. But tonight is just the start of a conversation that must continue, no matter who you vote for. I hope it's me. Thank you for the opportunity to earn your vote on May 17th from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Mr. Trager.
Northfield schools are at an inflection point. The decisions that we make mid-May will have the power to impact our children, our home values, and our community in ways once unimaginable. The landscape has changed. Living in the post-COVID world shook our society, nevertheless our schools to their very core. We certainly have social issues, cultural issues, and simple disagreements that will find their way to our board. But what is undeniable and most pressing is the economic disaster that we're about to face. I can't fix it. I can't in good conscience outline a plan to fix it until we fully understand and digest the definitive economic impact of the LIPA settlement. I can, however, promise to help chart a course for the future that hurts your pockets least and empowers your children most. Our board has moved mountains in the past. I've watched in awe for the last few years. We have so many talented, capable people, both on the board and in the district's employ. Educators, administrators, small business owners, psychologists, but what we are lacking is financial expertise. No doubt everyone up here is well qualified, but where I'm able to differentiate myself is that my core competency lies in finance. If elected, I hope to act as liaison between all the parties and people we see here tonight, to bridge a gap that's resulted in educators and administrators being vilified by one side and praised by another, a gap that has neighbors precluding children from playing with one another and lies being spread on social media. We all live here and want what's best for our children. Our schools needn't be left or right, but they must be a sanctuary that fosters wonder on an elementary level and critical thinking on a secondary level. Our children deserve to become the greatest versions of themselves, and in order for that to happen, we must break the chains that currently bind us, equip the board with the proper acumen and skills necessary for the next life cycle of North Shore schools. I was talking to a friend earlier, a North Shore dad with 2 boys in the district. He compared our current board to a baseball team without a catcher. The catcher does the hard, tireless, thankless work, but in many ways, he or she defines the team. I can help this team, whoever that may be, in a unique way that perhaps others cannot. I ask that you vote for me in May on line 6 on the ballot and help us take home a win for everyone.
Ms. Grecky Marks.
This has been an amazing evening, and I'm really so proud and humbled by the attendance tonight and our community all coming here to really show the support for whichever candidate you are supporting or that you want to see on this board. I think that at the end of the day, a trustee is an elected position. We're elected, hopefully you'll vote for me as well, but we're elected to this position to represent the community, to represent the parents, to represent the taxpayers, and most importantly, to represent our students. As a trustee, it is important to listen to and hear the voices of the entire community. And I think, as it was mentioned before, I think it's truly dangerous to ignore any chatter, gossip, or information that's flying around the community as a trustee and as a representative of the community, because small concerns become big concerns, and if we don't address them when they come through, whether they're true or not, we're doing a disservice to ourselves, to the community, and to this district. And so I really, truly love where I live. I love where my children are going to school. I am here because of that. I want to be a bigger part of that for them, for you, and for all of your kids, and for everybody in this community. And so I hope that you will know that I will always support and listen and be there as a respectful and committed trustee for the next 3 years. So please vote for me on May 17th. And please feel free to reach out to me beyond this evening if you have any questions or concerns. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Sitko.
First, I'd like to congratulate each of you because you've taken a step that anybody who isn't in this room has not taken, and that's to become educated, to become informed, and to know who you're voting for and what you're voting for. So thank you all for being here tonight, taking time away from your families. As we make decisions on what we're going to do, each of us with our 3 votes in less than 3 weeks, I'd like to share some wisdom from a leader in one of our schools. And he said, we have become a society that yells at each other, and there is a lot of emotion, and I get it. But we have to protect our children from that space as much as we can. That was said earlier this year. That resonated with me for a long time. That is why we need to be sure that the trustees who we put into these positions, that we can entrust, that they can follow the guidance, the wisdom of one of our leaders here in our schools. As a trustee, I will protect our children. I will respect our neighbors. I will empower our teachers, and I'll manage our investments, our tax dollars that are we choose to invest into North Shore. I'll manage those investments responsibly. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for being involved and becoming educated. Thank you for helping to stop the spread of misinformation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being objective. I hope that you will continue to support the schools, to come out on May 17th, to vote to support the budget, to support our Vikings, and I hope that you will find me on choice number 1 on the ballot. Thank you.
Mr. Ludmar.
I love this community. I've proven my dedication to making it better. We need to hear each other. We need to listen. People concerned about taxes shouldn't be called school haters. And people who support investment and reserve shouldn't be called anti-community. We all want good schools, and neighbors must respect difference of opinion. I try to ignore the personal and endless social media and private email attacks on people who serve on this board, because sadly that's the price of volunteering to serve these days, and I accept it while giving countless hours of my time on this board and our playing fields to make North Shore a better place. Last weekend there were some vicious and baseless personal smears made online against my wife and me, which crossed the line. There are a very few loud voices in this community not interested in the thoughtful dialogue that I'm talking about. They sit behind their keyboards and they try to divide us, and it's time to stand up. Respectful difference is important. It should be celebrated, but adults should be held to at least the same standard as our kids who look to us as role models. I'm sure these comments will elicit more smears and slanders and innuendo from these people, because that's what they do. But I'm not talking to them right now. I'm talking to the 99.9% of people who live in this community who don't communicate that way, that are rational and live by the golden rule of treating others the way we want them to treat us. So whether or not you vote for me on May 17th, Dave Ludmar, I'm not sure what row number I am, please consider whether you want to be part of the toxic discourse we all know is a distraction from the issues we've been facing in our community, the real issues. I wish we talked about LIPA more tonight, because that is the real issue. I've chosen to use this as an opportunity, however, to try and elevate the dialogue and call on people to stop feeding this beast of anger and incivility that is tearing our community apart. And I hope you'll consider my proven positive leadership that I bring to North Shore, and that everyone comes out on May 17th. Thank you.
Mr. Svendsen.
Did you stop my time? All right, because that was long for Dave, so. or long for me coming on. So either way.
Don't start again. I thought I saw just a yellow sign. I was okay, right?
It was very important for me to be here tonight. I hope that people are looking for the right people to serve on the board. My goal was in joining this as a candidate was to help. About 15 years ago in my district, my superintendent retired. The board president called me and asked if I was going to apply for the position. I hadn't even considered it, as I loved being a principal. But he was honest and said they wanted me to know that they weren't guaranteeing me the job. I applied and I didn't get it. A much more qualified person got it, and I loved working with her for many, many years. But now I know that I am the most qualified person to help get us through the next 3 years and beyond. I hope that, and I know that it won't be easy. Just like it wasn't easy through all of this, the schooling and the COVID and everything that we're doing in life and all the stuff that we do, we need to work together to get through those times and be a part of a community. So thanks for your time, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. I really appreciate it. I really believe and I know that I'm a qualified person to run this year. While others have many other qualities, my 33 years in education and 40 years on the boards of soccer organizations have given me the experience needed. I have dealt with some version of pretty much anything we will deal with. I can promise you that I will always listen, always communicate, and always work hard. My slogan is, the signs aren't out yet, but you know, solutions through collaboration, because that is the way I've run every job that I've ever been in. Together we can accomplish what we need to accomplish, and I can tell you that I can tell you now to hold me accountable for that. That what we said here tonight and what I say, and any time I meet with you, is that we're getting to that point. And if 3 years we are not better then don't vote for me again. But I am confident that you will, because we will accomplish what we would try to and we put our minds to. I'm still around even after this. Email me, Facebook me, even though I'm not as good on Facebook. And, you know, I'll get back to you, and I'm always willing to talk at any point. So thank you very much, and good night.
I'd like to have a great round of applause for all of our candidates. Thank you for putting yourselves out there. So thank you to our candidates. The public and the league appreciate your willingness to answer questions from voters thoughtfully and candidly, and in civil discourse with your challengers. This is democracy at its best. And I'm just going to remind people, remember the school vote is May 17th, so please make sure to turn out and vote.